All right, so Ethan Klein was on Howie Mandel's podcast a few days ago, and it was a pretty good podcast because Howie was actually asking him some difficult questions that I don't think he was really prepared for. And also they talked about Trisha Paytas a little bit. And it's pretty funny because Howie and his daughter who host the podcast, you could tell they're not very familiar with Ethan. And a lot of people are mad because they weren't prepared or they didn't do their research, even though they did do enough research to figure out about the recent controversy with the whole NRA situation that Ethan got himself into a few weeks ago. And they brought that up like right away. I was surprised. And I think Ethan was too. I think on his most recent podcast, he said he felt a little caught off guard. And it sounds like he kind of regrets doing it. He said like right after the podcast, he started texting everybody about how poorly it went. But I thought it went great because finally somebody put Ethan in the hot seat. Like usually he's just on his own podcast. He doesn't do many other podcasts. And on his own podcast, he's obviously always in control. He's goofing on somebody else. He's surrounded by yes men. And like sometimes the guests he has on, he'll try to like make a fool out of them, like with Jeff Wittick and Steven Crowder. And he'll also ask his guests controversial questions and try to get into their personal lives sometimes, like with the Bobby Lee and Brendan Schaub thing. So it's just interesting seeing him on someone else's podcast, being confronted and being asked some difficult questions that make him a little uncomfortable. And he's not surrounded by all his yes men. So let's check it out. First, we're going to take a look at him talking about the whole NRA controversy. And this is in like the first 5 minutes. So they got right down to business.
It's his band.
Oh, yeah. I got recently suspended. Yeah. I said jokingly that, you know, somebody should bomb the NRA.
And now just said it again.
You tell me what's wrong with saying that.
Because you're, honestly, what's wrong with saying that?
Yeah, there's nothing. What's wrong with that?
Are you kidding me?
No, I'd like to.
Now, see, now I'm scared to say what's wrong with that because you have followers.
No,
and you have people.
I was joking. I was talking about the recent mass shootings in.
No, I get it.
Texas.
I get what you're saying,
yeah,
but
and you know, I kind of blurted it out. We rolled it back, and there was like a whole conservative kickback where like Alex Jones and Don Jr. and everyone was, you know, parading me around as a domestic terrorist or something. So YouTube had to do something and we got suspended for a week.
So this is awesome because I guarantee this is one of the first times in a while that Ethan's talked to somebody that actually has a different perspective than him and doesn't just blindly defend whatever he says. And I don't think he's really friends with Ethan. So I doubt Ethan expected this at all. Like when he said, so what's wrong with that, Howie? Like what's wrong with joking about a bomb threat? He's like, are you serious? Obviously there's something wrong with that and you have followers that could listen to you. So I think Ethan was caught off guard, even though he still handled it well by bringing up how Donald Trump was sharing it and Alex Jones and all these people. You know, he's trying to make it sound not as bad by saying just all the people that care are these crazy right-wing lunatics, you know. So with the clip we just watched, you could tell Ethan was expecting Howie to defend him and just be like, oh, you know, you're a comedian, you're just joking around, you're on your podcast, nobody's taking it that seriously. But to be fair, I don't think Howie saw the full clip. I don't even know if he saw the clip at all, because Ethan keeps saying like, let's pull it up, let's take a look at it. And then they finally do pull it up, but it's just the edited clip, so it cuts off right when he calls for the threat, and it doesn't have him walking it back at all. And then also right after that, it plays another controversial clip of his, and then here's Ethan reacting to it. And I love the look on Howie and his daughter's face. Like they're like, what? Like you're really saying this kind of stuff?
The second part where I say the NRA. And here's the part where I say, you know, go outside Ted Cruz's house and shoot blanks.
Okay, but let's just say, let's take the first statement. The fact that we, you and me, both, are putting things out there on the airway.
I don't think anyone's going to bomb the NRA. I think you should watch the clip before you make a decision if you think it's like a
No, I'm just saying that you don't, so you have no...
I think I have a lot of responsibility with what I say. I take what I say very seriously. And I think that what people say has an effect on the world and affects people. So I do take that seriously, right? Like, I acknowledge that. I just think in this case, that's not what happened.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know that we were going to talk about this, and I didn't plan on talking about this. It's just that when you said, I'll be on, and then I go to YouTube and it says ban.
No, it's fine.
It was
I'm
just
an
a timing.
Open book. I'll talk about anything.
Anything.
So this podcast is so good because what they're doing to Ethan here is usually what he does to other people. He's usually the one trying to be the moral authority and talking down to people like, do you know what you did is wrong? Like he lets people hear it when they screw up. and there's really no excuses. But for once, it's finally the other way around. And it's crazy that Howie Mandel is the person to do this, because it sounds like he barely even knows Ethan. He's not that familiar with him. And then also, I mean, he doesn't want to get involved in any kind of drama, I'm sure, which, like, if you're talking about Trisha Paytas, which we'll get to, you're playing with fire. But Howie definitely earned some more respect from me, because this was a good opportunity for him to call Ethan out, and he did kind of take advantage of it. Obviously, he doesn't know Ethan that well, so he can't go too hard on him. But I'm sure Ethan expected this to be a fluff piece kind of thing, where he goes in there, Howie asks him about his family and like how he started his channel and everything. But no, he actually asked him some difficult questions.
Joke can be perceived as offensive,
sure,
and I could be canceled, and I can lose it, or people could listen to me and believe that that's a true belief.
Yeah.
Do you not?
And by the way, I'm not someone who's like, cancel culture is ruining the world and all this shit. Like, people are entitled to get offended by things you say, and that's fine. Sometimes things offend me, and a good example is Chappelle, and there's a lot of comedians. Ricky Gervais recently did a set where they just have like a lot of jokes about trans people. Now, a lot of people think that's funny and fine. And there's a lot of trans people or LGBTQ plus people who find it offensive. And I don't think it's anyone's right to tell them, well, you can't be offended. But nobody's telling them don't make it either. It's just it's not that different than it's always been. I mean, it's just a matter of public opinion and people deciding if they want to watch you or not.
I like how Ethan says that people have the right to be offended, and this is how it's always been. Cancel culture isn't a real thing. I mean, that's what he's trying to say here, it sounds like. And that's the same kind of thing that Def Noodle says. It's just people expressing their opinion. They have the right to be offended. Like Dave Chappelle and Ricky Gervais, he's making it sound like they go too hard on trans people, and trans people have the right to voice their opinion and protest their shows or whatever they're doing. But then when the LGBTQ plus community tries to cancel Ethan, or they are offended by what he says, they're being way too sensitive, they're taking him too seriously, they need to stop watching. He'll tell them to shut up. Like, check out this clip. Does this sound like somebody who thinks that you don't have a right to tell people not to be offended?
I don't know what's up with Ethan today, but something's off. Bad vibes this episode.
Shut the fuck up. Unsubscribe. Go away. Jesus Christ.
He said, it sometimes feels like Ethan thinks LGBTQ plus people are exotic or something. It's super uncomfy. Yeah, I think y'all need to fucking... Do you think it's hard for a straight person to understand how it feels to always have people define you by how you prefer sex? Is that a valid criticism?
No, I'm so fucking frustrated with these people.
Get the fuck out!
So wait, what was I? Where did I even? Do you think some of y'all are way too fucking sensitive for the show? To be totally honest, like people in this thread who are saying they're grossed out and whatever. I think this with peace and love, you might be too sensitive to watch this show. If you're watching this show and you're perpetually offended by things I'm saying, you may want to just stop watching. Like, genuinely. Like, does get annoying with some of y'all getting offended all the time.
So, of course, when it comes to Ethan, the rules are always different. Like, he thinks Dave Chappelle and Ricky Gervais, it sounds like they're being too offensive, and if people want to express how much they're offended by what they're saying, then they can. But then when it comes to Ethan, it's as simple as, hey, just don't watch. If you think I'm too offensive, don't watch. I don't want to hear your criticism. You're way too sensitive. And it's funny because it's the same community. And you could say the same thing about Dave Chappelle and Ricky Gervais. If you're offended by them, then you're too sensitive. Just don't watch. It's not that serious. They're just comedians. But of course, if you say that about those two, I'm sure Ethan would say that you're transphobic. Like, which is it? Are people too sensitive? And if they're getting offended by a show or a comedy podcast or a comedy show, they just shouldn't watch? Or do we need to listen to them and maybe step back and not say offensive things? Because Ethan, he always wants to have it both ways. Everyone needs to be politically correct, but then when it comes to him, he can say whatever the hell he wants. He's just joking around. He doesn't care who he offends. If he offends you, you're being too sensitive.
No, I know, yeah. but you not see that.
But like I said, yeah, don't the president. That would be obviously
no. Don't any. Well, how about don't anybody?
Oh, nobody.
Don't you think that? Don't you think that it's?
Are you not concerned? Nobody.
Would you not say nobody? Are you not? All kidding aside, are you not concerned that somebody who is a huge fan of yours, that has the exact same political leaning as you, might listen to it and take?
If you saw the clip, you'd understand. It was like it was like very light, and the whole thing.
But don't you think that Trump does that sometimes?
Yeah, but
also?
he's
See, this is how it always is. If somebody else does something, it's like, oh my God, they need to be careful with what they're doing. They're calling for acts of violence. Like, they're just going way too far with things. But with Ethan, it's like, oh, come on, I'm just a comedian. If you saw the clip, you'd understand. It's not that serious. Nobody was actually going to listen to me. And even in this podcast, like you saw, he's like joking around about it, and he's clearly not taking it seriously. And how he's all nervous, and he's like, should you be saying this on my podcast? And he tells Ethan multiple times not to say it, but then Ethan just keeps saying it. And I think even on Ethan's own podcast, he won't even say it anymore. He'll just say like B word or the B threat, or he doesn't actually say it, I don't think, on his podcast. But then when he's on Howie's, he'll just keep saying it, and they have to bleep it every time. All right, so now we're going to get into where they start talking about Trisha Paytas, because I don't think Howie really knows their relationship that well. And he's kind of familiar with Trisha because she was on AGT, and also Trisha was dating Jason Nash, and Howie would hang out with the Vlog Squad once in a while. So he does kind of know Trisha, but he doesn't know her relationship with Ethan that well.
Wait, but does your wife talk to her brother?
No. We were all really close with him, and he ended up marrying, Trisha, and everything went off the rails.
Weren't you nervous going into it that like this may never work with family?
How long have they been married?
Never work with family.
Well, I work with my wife since the first day.
She's saying that with sitting beside her father.
That's the gag you guys have.
See, Howie's daughter, Jacqueline, I think is her name, she makes a good point here. Like, going into that podcast, I think anybody could have told you it was going to end terribly and their family was going to fall apart. Like, I remember just a couple episodes in, I was like, man, this dude is in some trouble. When this podcast ends, they are going to be on terrible terms. And I think Ethan even knew that too, but he doesn't care. He'd rather just take the views and the money and worry about that later. I think if he cared about his relationship with Moses and Trisha, who is going to be his sister-in-law, I think if he cared about having their relationship, he probably wouldn't have done that podcast, because I'm sure that only made things worse. Like, if it weren't for that podcast, maybe they'd be on all right terms. And also, Ethan was definitely enabling her. He wouldn't fact check anything she was saying. He would rarely call her out. She was being like really mean to some of his employees, and he would just put up with it. Like, she was running that place, and she was like treating everyone like shit, and he just didn't seem to care because he was getting the money, he's getting the views, and that's good for the short term, but in the long run, it did not go well. Like, now their family's a mess. It looks bad on his part just for having Trisha on there. I've made a lot of videos about how he has like no credibility at all, and I mean, he just looks like a complete idiot with the whole Trisha situation.
They've been dating maybe, I don't know, maybe a year plus or something. I don't know.
And they're having a child?
Yeah.
She's going to be the mother?
Oh, baby.
But you're gonna
see, that's a controversial take.
Yeah.
Did I do? No, I meant that like I'm just trying to.
Well, let's unpack that, Howie. What do you mean by she's gonna be a mother?
She's kind of wild.
Yes.
Based on what you've seen on the internet, is she actually?
Are your in-laws? Do they live here? I met your mother.
My mom. Yeah, my whole family lives here. My whole family.
And how are the in-laws with her?
Oh, well, they hate her guts. Yeah, if you want to ask seriously.
I did ask seriously.
Yeah, they fucking hate her.
Okay.
More than me, probably.
So then,
I don't hate her, to be honest.
Is your brother-in-law estranged with
people are going to love this episode, by the way, because I never talk about her.
Really? So is your brother then estranged from everyone?
No.
He's close to Trisha's family.
Yeah, he is close with Trisha's family, and he's close with his family, my wife's family. You know, they talk. They just
But I just asked you that. So
my wife's family, my family who lives here.
Yeah. But your wife's family, you said hates her.
They live in Israel.
So they don't know her.
They don't know her very well, yeah.
Oh.
This is a lot of drama.
Yeah, I don't think Howie really knows what he could be getting himself into here, potentially. Like, if Trisha wanted to respond to this, I mean, things could get really ugly. And I know Trisha fans are like, man, Ethan, he's bringing her up and all that. Which I kind of understand them being angry because Ethan said he would never talk about her. I think he's more of a hypocrite because I remember when Ela was pregnant, Ethan's mom said, if Hila had a miscarriage, it's all Trisha's fault. Like, she said that to Trisha. And then while Trisha's pregnant, Ethan's going on this podcast and talking about her and like kind of stirring the pot a little bit. I know Ethan didn't bring her up, and this isn't even his podcast, even though he did clickbait her in front of me. So I don't know. Like, he definitely likes to kind of stir the pot a little bit. Well, not a little bit, a lot. I mean, he definitely likes to talk about her, and I think he would be if it weren't for Hila. She just wants him to shut up about it. But he knows that gets him views, so he just really wants to talk about it. So I'm sure he's jealous. He like talked about all this on Howie's podcast, which I was surprised he did. I thought he'd be saving all this for his own podcast, because Howie's, I think this is his most popular podcast already. It's got like almost 200,000 views, I think, and all of his other ones, they have like 10, 20,000, because he got like the perfect clickbait. Like, Ethan talks about Trisha Paytas and frenemies and all that. Like, that is what the people want to hear. So I mean, the fact that Ethan didn't talk about this on his own podcast, I'll give him a little credit there, even though I think today he did. Like, when he was looking back at this podcast, he started talking about Trisha a little bit. So, I mean, he just can't help himself. But I hope Trisha doesn't take the bait here. I hope she just stays silent, you know, just chills out, because if she does respond, it's not going to help at all, and it's going to look like she's trying to stir up some drama, even though that's what Ethan's doing here. But I think if Trisha just takes the high road, she'll look a lot better. Even if, like, I'm sure she's getting some hate. I'm sure Ethan's fans are going to go after her a little bit, which makes Ethan a hypocrite, especially the fact that his mom said that if Hila had a miscarriage, it's Trisha's fault. Now Trisha's pregnant, and, you know, Ethan's fans are going to go give her shit. Like, he's definitely an asshole and a hypocrite. But I think if Trisha just stays silent, just continues on drama-free, it'll just be better for her. Like, if Ethan keeps talking about her while she hasn't talked about him in who knows how long, and she stayed out of drama, she's going to look like the bigger person here. And people will just be like, dude, really? You're going to use Trisha as clickbait and you're going to talk about her to get views? Like, it's only going to hurt Ethan, as long as Trisha doesn't respond. But if she does, then it'll get Ethan going even more. And then his fans will be like, well, she's responding to him and she won't stop talking about him, so you talk about her. And it's just some giant thing. Like, if Ethan like keeps talking about her, which I don't know if he will, he just brought her up on this podcast and I think on his podcast today, but if he continues, people are just gonna be like, dude, this is pathetic. Like, the fact that he did a frenemies episode the other day, or he like clickbaited frenemies or something, I don't even know what he did. Like, that shows he's kind of desperate, because he knows if he titles something frenemies, that's gonna get views for sure. I still feel like, though, there is a possibility of a reunion between those two, because I mean, it just benefits both of them pretty much, even though I'm sure Ethan's fan base will be a little mad, and Trisha's too maybe, but obviously those two together gets views and it'll get people's attention. Like, if she actually did come back and they talked about everything, or like, I don't know, talked about anything, I'm sure that would get a shitload of views, and it's hard for both of them to turn that down. And I don't know if Trisha would want to go back on there and do that podcast again, but I think Ethan, if it weren't for Hila, he'd probably do it tomorrow. And on this podcast, Howie wanted to call Trisha. That would have been wild if they got Trisha on the phone. Like, this would be a legendary podcast. But Ethan's like, you know what? If Hila says okay, even though he probably knew Hila would say no, if she says okay, then sure, we'll call her. So they call Hila first. And of course, she's like, no chance.
Hello.
Hi. Hila, we're doing the podcast with Howie, okay? So,
okay.
So here's a question. And
what's going on?
So Howie wants. Hey,
kids.
Teddy. Okay, so Howie wants to call Trisha on the show and mediate.
Oh.
Okay. Thank you, Hila. Thank you.
No.
Not no.
Exactly.
Let me talk to her.
That's what I said.
Plug her in the ear.
No.
Plug her in the ear so I could talk to her.
I go. You guys don't understand. This will be like.
No. Here's the thing. I met her in Malibu also. Here.
My dad thinks.
So here's how I feel. I know Trish. I know her. I've known her. Oh yeah, I met her.
He's using that term.
Let me talk.
Colloquial.
No, I'm not. I'll tell you why I know her. She was a big fan of Howard Stern years ago, and she was an AGT. And then I know I was friends with Dobrik, and she went out with Jason, and she's actually been here in the building. And I did not know that she married your brother. I didn't know that. So I'm being honest with you. I'm not that close. I was not invited. I didn't know where they were registered. I know nothing about that. And then I was just informed that this is, it's rocky. I did know that your husband did a show with her, and I saw there was fireworks on the air. So I know it's that. What really bothers me, Gila, is when families are torn apart. And I just wanted to make
very real.
No, it is very real. And wanted to call her and just say that I'm sitting here with Ethan, and I would love nothing better than to get some sort of just a conversation going. She can hang up on me. I will say that. She can hang up on me. He could hang up and say, I don't want to talk. You could say whatever. I just want to call her and do that. And it's very funny because your husband has been very verbal and not confrontational, but
I made them very uncomfortable.
He did make me really
Howie
uncomfortable.
has been stressed. I didn't say I can do or say anything.
Then I said, "Can I
Don't
talk
put
to
words in my mouth.
Then I said, "Can I talk to your
You
sister-in-law?"
make me sound like an asshole when you say it like that.
Then I said, "Can I talk to your sister-in-law?" And he said, "Whoa, that I got to ask my wife about."
Yeah.
Apparently, you're the power. You're holding the power.
Yes.
Well, the thing is that it's there's like very it's a whole thing.
No, I know,
It's a
but
whole
here's the
family
thing.
thing.
But
It's an
okay,
unfortunate
I
situation.
give up. I give up. Thank you for being on the podcast, Gila.
Yeah, so this podcast was getting pretty dicey. They even cut some of that out right there at the end. And like you could tell Ethan, like right there, he didn't sound too happy. He's like, don't say that about me. Like, you're making me sound like an asshole. So I don't think he really enjoyed doing this podcast. Like the one podcast he does, and it just does not go well for him, even though it did get a lot of views. And I think Ethan's fans liked it. So I mean, maybe it did go well, but I think Ethan was uncomfortable, and I'm sure like he probably wouldn't do this again, or I'm sure he won't even go on a podcast again. But I think with this podcast, I just don't think Howie is a big fan of his, or like he finds him interesting, but I don't think he likes all the controversial stuff he's been a part of, and the whole bomb threat thing. I don't think he's cool with that. Even if Ethan did walk it back, it sounded like Howie did not like that. And I think maybe his daughter Jacqueline, I think maybe she's a Trisha fan because she said she was really into frenemies. So maybe when that ended, she took Trisha's side. I don't know. And then also, I think his son, I think it was his son behind the scenes here, like with the producers and editors. And apparently he's aware of who Leafy is. And he told his sister before this that like Leafy was banned, and Ethan kind of gets a slap on the wrist whenever he screws up on YouTube. So it sounds like Howie's son maybe isn't a big fan of Ethan, and also maybe he's the one who pulled up the clip, like just the edited clip of Ethan talking about the bomb threat, and then the other clip of him talking about being outside of Ted Cruz's house shooting blanks in the air or whatever. So maybe this guy just really doesn't like Ethan, or maybe none of them like Ethan, because I mean Howie didn't sound like he's a big fan, unless he's just trying to do more of a controversial, edgy interview. But I'm glad it happened because nobody ever asks Ethan these questions to his face. Like, no way. Ethan's just around the same people that tell him the same shit, that all agree with him, that all think the same. He never hears any of this, at least in person. Obviously on the internet and on Twitter and everything, he hears it all the time. But like for somebody that he respects to say this kind of stuff, like right to him on a podcast, I think it's a pretty big deal.
For pictures, or
You're
something that
you're
you
talking
talked about.
Leafy is here. Are you a Leafy fan? Is your
No.
son a Leafy fan?
No,
You should come right out and say
But
it.
I don't know if he is. No, he's saying
saying
no.
no.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
saying no.
Yeah, so
But
this guy,
okay.
first of all, that is just another guy that I have nothing to do with, made like 13 videos about a girl, calling her ugly and harassing her and all this shit. And YouTube said they suspended his channel. And he's been in trouble a bunch of times. They thought it was egregious enough. I got nothing to do with that. I don't know why people need to compare what happened to him to me. It doesn't make any sense to me.
I'm not.
And I'm not that reckless, okay? Like,
Not
clearly
reckless.
you guys don't watch my show, and that's fine.
I actually do.
She does.
Okay.
I've seen you. I
But
said
I accept that I'm controversial, but it's not like every episode I'm saying the NRA, Howie.
No.
That was a one-time thing.
Right, and that's a one-time thing.
And by the way, we
but-
walked it back immediately.
So it's just too bad these people don't know more about Ethan's history and the stuff he's done and like the whole Leafy situation, because obviously Howie isn't very informed on this stuff. And his daughter, she says she watches the podcast, but I don't think so. I think she watched Frenemies. Like the other day, she thought Frenemies came back with Trisha just because they like clickbaited her in an episode, or they like clickbaited Frenemies or whatever. But the fact that they did bring up Leafy, and the fact that they're grilling him on this stuff, like Jacqueline, she is like, don't you realize that you're kind of getting away with this stuff, and if for anybody else they'd be banned? So it is pretty impressive that they're asking him these questions. It's just too bad they're not more informed. but they're not taking it easy on him, which is awesome to see. So there's just a couple more things I want to check out. And the first is Ethan talking about Israel and Jewish people, because I think it's so funny that one of the things that he calls Trisha Paytas out for now is being anti-Semitic, yet Ethan openly admits he doesn't like Jewish people. And if you watch his podcast, it's pretty obvious he's not a big fan of them, even though obviously he is Jewish, but I mean, you could still be anti-Semitic, and he really hates Hasidic Jewish people.
I love Israel. I lived there for 5 years with my wife before we moved here.
What did she do in Israel?
I fucking hate it, but not for the reasons you'd think. It's just because I actually don't like Jews that much, which is kind of unassuming and weird, but yeah, I just don't like
Is
them.
it because we
No,
cut
I'm
the
kidding,
end of
I'm
your
kidding.
dick off?
That's not the real reason.
I never know if you're joking
No,
or
that's
not.
not true. That's not true. I don't like the whole hustle and bustle. It's a they're hardened people.
But they're at war
It's a
all
hard
the time.
life. Yeah, exactly.
So he's all over the place here because I think he's just caught off guard and he just can't get it together. First he's like, oh, I love Israel. And then he's like, I hate it because I hate Jewish people. And then he's like, oh, no, I'm kidding. I'm joking around, which maybe he is, but he sounded pretty serious there when he said it. It didn't really sound like a joke, and I don't know why it'd be a joke. And I just watching him, I think I made other videos about this. He's said a lot of anti-Semitic stuff before. All right, so there's just one more thing I wanted to bring up, and that's him. He's talking about his kid and how his kid goes to a school with a lot of guards, and it's like really safe because he knows there's a lot of crazy people out there and people that hate him. So he want to make sure his kid is at a private school with guards, and like guards make it safe.
We don't put him in videos, or we don't show his face at
smart.
least. And he goes to a private school with lots of guards, and our house is secure.
All right, so people are probably going to think this is a stretch here, but I think it's funny that he makes it sound like, oh, there's lots of guards, so that means the school's safe, and I trust like my kid going there, which I'm sure it is. I'm sure there are guards. I'm sure there's plenty of security and all that stuff, which makes it safer, right? But according to Ethan, not really, because a few weeks ago, after the school shooting happened, he was talking about how people think part of the solution could be more security and more guards at the school. And Ethan and Hila are like, that is ridiculous. Do people actually think that? They must be out of their minds for thinking that.
The solution can't be more guns, more security at schools. Do you understand how fucking insane that is?
I don't think anybody actually believes it.
I'm afraid to tell you that, but there are people in this country that believe that.
Well,
It's
maybe-
a poll.
but
It's a
maybe-
poll with
okay.
100 million people in it.
Maybe it's not 100 million though.
There's a lot of people, man, that are a part of the gun cult in this country.
But there's a lot of people that love guns, but they have it.
So with Ethan's kid's school, like it sounds like the fact that there's security there are guards there, it's really safe and he trusts it. But then for their public schools, they want more guards. Are they crazy that that's really the solution? Even though, like, I agree that shouldn't be the only solution, but I think there should probably be more guards. And it sounds like Ethan thinks that too. The fact that there's guards at his kid's school, it makes it safer. And also, obviously, I have to mention the guards and cops or whoever's guarding schools don't always do their job. Some of them are idiots. Some of them are scared. They're cowards. I mean, with the school shooting in Texas, it was just pathetic how the police handled that. Obviously, I think everyone can agree on that now. But Ethan just said his kid's school is really safe because there are guards. And I'm sure Ethan wants guards and like the most security possible at his kid's school. But then when it comes to public schools and trying to like make them safer, the thought of more guards and security is just insane. He's like, what? People actually think that? Well, yeah, you think that. Like you just said, guards make a school safer, basically. So that's why I think Ethan doesn't care about these issues as much as he claims to, because it's more about like, oh, Republicans are so stupid. They think guards should be at schools. Like, I agree that's not the answer, but that's going to help at least. And you just basically admitted that. All right, so that's about it for this video. Thanks for watching. Make sure you hit the like button, leave me a comment, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you at the next video.